minutes.
They didn't have
I know they might have to have
halfway that we have to make it.
that's contrary to
Because
probably.
like I say, when we were going, when I was, I mean, I spent 40 years and dad anything. And I thought,
what can I say?
this is kind of spending now, the staff.
That's the way I was
putting stuff
taught
for our
and
Star Wars. We're
When I was
pretty much-
baby Star Wars, that's the way I did
Yeah,
it.
so
Good afternoon. Sorry to interrupt everybody.
The nerve.
good evening.
Welcome to the Monday, November 16th, Washougal City Council Workshop Meeting. Rose, could you call the roll, please?
Councilmember Boger,
Here.
Councilmember Greenlee,
Here.
Councilmember Wagner. Here. Councilmember McDaniel,
Here.
Councilmember Shoemaker,
Here.
Councilmember Lindsay,
Here.
Councilmember Freeman,
Here.
and Student Representative Bischoff.
Here.
Thank you. Are there any members of the public that would like to comment to council? Already moving quickly through the agenda. Moving on to new business. First item under finance, professional services agreement with Renee Carroll for tourism promotion. David.
Thank you, Mayor. Afternoon, Council. In your workshop packet is the draft professional services agreement that renews essentially a very similar document that we had last year with Renee Carroll Consulting. She's been undertaking tourism promotion activities, as you know, for the city for a couple of years, and has been an annual contract, so our professional services agreement. So it's in your packet as a draft this week, and the intent is to have it back in front of you on the consent agenda on December 7th for your approval so that she can continue her efforts right away at the first of the year. The terms of the contract are identical to last year in terms of the dollar amount and the not-to-exceed amount of $20,000. This has been vetted through the Lodging Tax Advisory Committee. It's funded exclusively with lodging tax dollars, not a general fund expenditure. The scope of services is attached. It's been updated for the 2016 scope. Much of it is still the same in terms of some of the general activities that we undertake and for advertising for the community through our website and other advertising venues, and then some specificity around some of the different events that are potential in 2016. Those are obviously new and updated. So pretty straightforward. And again, we have that. We'll have that on the 7th of December for your consideration on consent.
Michelle?
When you said it was vetted through which board was that?
Lodging Tax Advisory Committee. Any expenditure of funds from our lodging tax revenues is required to go through the Lodging Tax Advisory Committee.
And those are mostly businesses? No?
No, we have Councilmember McDaniel is the chair and the representative of the council. It's a statutory construct, so it requires someone representing those that pay the tax. So we have a representative from the Best Western.
Okay.
It requires a representative of someone who spends that type of money. So we have a Lions Club representative. We also have a chamber representative, and then there's someone on the committee that I think is not super participatory from the other lodging establishment. So
I'm sorry, I didn't follow that statement. What is?
we have 2 lodging establishments,
Oh, okay.
and
What's
one-
the other one?
Rama.
Oh, that's
Rama.
Rama.
Rama. Yep.
And that was the Washougal Chamber of Commerce?
Camas Washougal.
Oh, okay.
Didn't
Brent?
somebody say they were owned by the same person? So maybe they don't.
Nope.
We had this discussion just recently. Okay.
I don't remember.
And so everybody's happy with her performance and such on the board?
Yep.
Yeah.
As far as I know.
Joyce?
I've worked with Renee on several different projects at different times. She's very professional. She's quite competent, and I think she's amazing. So, yes,
And I'd reiterate that I worked with her on QUITA, and I think she does a fine job with that.
Is the $55 an hour, is that including people?
David?
David?
This is much easier when people raise their hands.
Thank you. I had a conversation with our financial director this afternoon, and one of the questions I ask is, how do you know whether or not, whether these activities that she's performing are actually accomplishing what we want to accomplish? How do you evaluate that? And she came up with an excellent idea, which I'd like to get incorporated into the next contract. I don't want to delay this one. But the idea is to take a look at increases or decreases in the amount of hotel motel tax that we collect. We report that to the state. That figure is readily available to us. And it seems like it would be an excellent way to evaluate whether or not the services rendered in accordance with this contract are having the desired effect. And I offer that to my colleagues for their consideration.
St. Joe?
Never mind. Thank you.
Jennifer?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Thanks. Considering we've seen the numbers go up and up over the past few years in the hotel and motel tax collected in that particular fund in our budget, it's not a lot. I mean, it's a little bit of an increase. So, I mean, I think it's justified, definitely. So.
Brent?
I would agree with that. But one of the things, I've sat on for probably 10 years now or more as the legal advisor to the public authority that owns and operates the Hilton Hotel. And the hotel business is can be pretty cyclical, and some of that would be completely beyond her control. And the only thing you can say is, well, it might have been worse if we didn't have her, if we had a downturn. But I still think it's a good idea to come up with some kind of performance metrics for her. I don't know if we need to do it in this contract, though.
No, it's too late for this contract. Paul, may I?
Go ahead.
Yeah, can I? I was thinking of the next contract, but taking into consideration the concerns about how her performance might not be reflected in those figures, I think it'd be pretty rare, but that's something that could be considered when the contract is renewed every year, because she does a great job.
Sure.
I'm sorry, Paul.
No, go ahead.
Thank you for allowing me.
I'll pass, never mind.
Other questions, comments? Okay. Trevor, are you going to take the public works items?
Good evening.
Good evening.
Passcode. Not very secure now. I think it's in Keynote. Oh, it is. Sorry. Well, we've got several miscellaneous projects for Public Works for the end of 2015. As you saw in the memo from our city engineer, the first is to do some improvements down at the police department to fill in a swale and to add some capacity as far as the parking lot. The engineer estimate on that project is $12,000. The bids came in at just half of that, just over $6,000. So we're proposing to move forward with that. That was identified in the 2015 budget, right at $12,000. So we're looking to move forward with that project. Some safety enhancements for that as well, as far as being able to access the back of emergency vehicles, the police squad cars. The other three projects, I have a short PowerPoint slide for those three projects. These were not identified in the 15 budget, but we do have the capacity within the appropriated budget for 2015 to be able to accomplish these. So the first is some drainage improvements at the cemetery. The first entrance to the west during storm conditions, which we've experienced over the last couple weeks. We have some sheeting over grave sites as well as some puddling on the north side of Q Street. So what's proposed there is to install a dry well as well as a small section of curb and gutter with a catch basin. Last summer, we had the geotech out to do the soils analysis to make sure we'd be able to discharge into the soils. The composition was appropriate to be able to install a dry well, and the catch basin would be installed on the north side and be able to sheet off into that basin and into the dry well. So it'd be an intersection improvement, not only for sheeting water and water standing over top of existing grave sites, but also the puddling for vehicles that utilize that street as well. The next project is just to the north of the cemetery at W Street and Stiles Road. We have some sheeting that's coming off of Stiles Road to the south and to the east onto a couple of two separate parcels. The drainage system is failing currently. It's been in place for several decades, dating back even to county infrastructure prior to becoming our facility. We'd like to excavate a small drainage swale, as you can see hashed on the east side in the purple or violet, extending from the lot to the north all the way to the intersection of W Street and Stiles, where it would tie into an existing culvert to be able to make its way south of W Street during inclement weather. That's about 175 feet in length, approximately. And cost, low bid, apparent low, is just over $3,000. W Street, so just east of the drainage project we were just discussing, we've had multiple inquiries about speeding, complaints about speeding along this specific facility, all the way from 32nd Street to, I believe, 44th or so, where it goes into Columbia View subdivision. We did utilize traffic counts to be able to substantiate moving forward in the process to warrant speed bumps or speed tables. So when we did the study with tube counts, we got results of 85th percentile speeds were at 36 miles an hour, and the average, the mean, was at 30. Typically the trigger for us is 10 miles an hour above the posted speed. With this being a residential collector, it is posted at 25. So we're proposing two separate speed mitigation tools, if you will. One just east of 32nd Street, or just west of 35th, and then another one in between 36th and 37th Street. These are actually, rather than the abrupt bumps that you see like on, I think, I Street from 6th to 9th and a few others that we have like in the Sunset Ridge area, we're proposing tables for these. So they're actually 14 feet long, transition up almost like a raised intersection and transition back down. Also working that with emergency services, those are a little bit better received from police and fire as well, and been effective where we've installed them in the past.
Excuse me. Do we have any now?
We don't have any tables specifically like this. We've looked at them within other jurisdictions, specifically over in Vancouver.
I was thinking that what I'm thinking of describing is in Vancouver, where there's kind of like a big raised bump.
Yeah,
And wide.
and you'll see them from time to time used as crosswalks where they're raised at an intersection where you actually gain elevation and then go back down. A little bit different design, but similar to the downtown raised intersections. The whole thought process and design in that is in raising up. People's perception is drivers slow down.
I'm particularly pleased to see this. I think you and I went to a meeting right after I was elected in 2012 probably, of the people in that area just being so concerned about the speeding down W. So I think that's very good.
Question? On that swale, what is that going to look like? Is it going to be lined with something, or is it just going to be a ditch?
It'll be open X, and then we'll hydroseed it when we're able to do so, as far as the erosion control concerns. So it would be an open ditch.
And you would do what to it when you could?
We would hydroseed it to be able to get grass to take
Okay.
and grow. along the swale.
And does that stop the kind of volume and velocity that's coming down that hill?
Yeah, so part of the design, short of getting into the preliminary design, is to be able to have breaks within the actual swale as far as being able to surcharge and make its way to the next elevation. As you know from traveling that on a routine basis, it's fairly steep through there.
Yes.
It's, I believe, around 11 or 12%. So there is quite a bit of velocity that's coming off from north up in the Ash Park and North Stiles Road area. So
And
that's
that was
part of the design.
That was my concern. I see you've addressed it. Thank you.
Okay, Joe?
So we've addressed the speed problem on H, at the street down by the river that had so much trouble.
28th and H, is that what?
Is that the one?
My H.
Yeah,
is-
your H?
Speed limit signs are up, which certainly got recognized.
It never got speed bumps, so wasn't that the
No, there's no speed
request?
bumps. Yeah,
Wasn't
there
that
was-
the request of the people? What was the outcome of that, I guess is my question.
I was going for a yellow line down the middle of the road and speed signs. And we've got the speed limit signs of 25 miles an hour. Now, I haven't had anybody complain. They were just thrilled that the signs went up. But I haven't talked to anybody since
I
then.
have to research to see if we did a speed and data count in that area. I know we did at 28th and H when we got concerns just north of E Street. And the data dictated that there wasn't a mitigation need at the 28th and
This
G&H
is
area.
farther west than that.
Right.
Even if-
Ten-
I know since I came on council, that was an issue of neighbors coming and asking for help. And I just see this nice little plan, and I wonder whatever became of H Street.
I can research that and
Would you?
loop back to you. Yeah,
Be good.
definitely.
Thanks.
Paul?
My only concern here is, do we know this company? These bids are low compared to everyone else's bid.
Yeah.
And
it's,
I remember that we had a problem with a previous contractor that we were in litigation with for literally years. And I would hate to go there again. So are we reasonably confident that these people can actually perform?
Yeah, based on performance. So currently, the low bid, the parent low on all four
Right.
projects,
Yeah,
has the contract for 34th and Evergreen intersection improvements. So they're doing the storm water as well as the sidewalk improvements at 34th and Evergreen.
okay,
That's at about 60%
Nice.
completion right now.
okay,
And then Holmes also completed the Addy Street CDBG sidewalk project.
okay,
They also completed the Elizabeth Park connection to the downtown.
Okay.
With the safe crossing and island across E Street
yep,
at 20th Street. So they're a well-known commodity.
okay, great, thank you.
We're getting a bond too,
Yes.
probably.
Yep.
Yeah, we had a bond and we were in court for years.
Other questions, Jennifer?
Question. So how do we determine which streets are good candidates for these types of speed bumps? And
So we have a traffic calming program via resolution as part of our transportation facility plan. So right now, it's really reactive as far as initiated by either complaints or citizens or concerns, and then we have a process to follow as far as that specific complaint or concern.
Okay. It's not too long ago, we received some complaints about 27th as well, the G Street area.
Yeah, and that's the data we just pulled within the last, I believe, month, and the preliminary numbers showed that additional mitigation wasn't warranted.
It wasn't warranted? Oh, my goodness.
Wasn't even close.
We don't install, I always forget the titles, it's not my area of expertise in engineering, but it's the MUTC, which is the Model Uniform Traffic
Traffic
Code.
Code, yeah.
And then there's some general traffic engineering standards, and our traffic engineer is bound professionally by those standards. And it's an industry-wide standard, and so
There's no favoritism.
traffic signals, stop signs, and
calming devices?
traffic calming devices, or whatever you would call, there's a process for it's called warranting them. And if they're warranted based on data, then we install. If they're not warranted, and a traffic engineer puts them in when they're not warranted, it can cause us some problems, because we've taken action on our streets and controlling the activities of drivers in a way that's not consistent with the standard of practice for traffic engineers in that profession. So we really try to stick with the MUTC and its guidelines. Now, there's some discretion. There's some discretion that we have, but it's not far from technical standards. So when they're not warranted, we don't put them in. And the MUTC talks about the 85th percentile speed and a 10 mile per hour discrepancy between that and the posted speed. So in this case, they were barely warranted because it came in at 36 miles per hour. Now that's a window of time when the tubes are out, and it's imperfect, but it's statistical, and so that's what you do. So other examples are when you put in crosswalks, when you control the crosswalks, when you don't control the crosswalks, and it's fairly complex, all the warranting activities that the traffic engineer undertakes. But that's the process.
Okay, thanks.
Other questions? Comments? Thanks, Trev.
Yep. So I'll be back to you at the December 7th meeting for consideration.
Did you want, that's it for the new business items, if I recall. It's pretty light. And just as a mention on these, as you saw, many of these taken separately are well below the $10,000 threshold. This is the type of thing we typically don't bring to the council. However, we're wrapping them all up with one contractor. And when we do that, and it becomes one contract, and it's over the threshold of $10,000, and that's why this is in front of you. It'll be back on the 7th, on consent for these. But I was going to ask, Mayor, Jen has a one-slide sort of roadmap for the property tax resolutions at the meeting this evening. Considering, I mean,
Sure.
I could, she's not going to be here until the meeting, but I could run through it
Sure.
very quickly, just as a precursor to the meeting. Yes, please. Thank you, Trevor. And I think that's also in keynote.
I know about bonds. I've been through bond litigation. I know about that. Bankruptcy. Construction.
So Jen prepared this one slide to try to provide some guidance about what the decision-making path would be for basically 3 different choices that the council has this evening. So we've laid these out, and this map here would apply separately to both the general property tax levy and the EMS property tax levy. They're both separate, and you don't have to do the same thing for those. So, as you know, the mayor's proposed budget captures full 1% property tax increase that is available to you. For that to occur, there are 2 resolutions you would need to pass. The first one is we're calling the IPD resolution. It captures the 0.251%, and it requires a majority of those in attendance. It looks like everyone's going to be here, so 4 votes would be required to do that. And if you do that, then 0.251% increase would happen. To get the rest to 1%, then you would pass this, the substantial need resolution that grabs the additional 0.749%, and that requires a majority of the full council plus 1. No matter how many of you are here, again, you're all here, that's 5 votes to do that. So if you took both of those actions, then go down to the very bottom bullet, there's an ordinance that is implementing the mayor's proposed budget that includes the full 1% for both general and EMS, and then you would ultimately pass the budget, And that just takes a majority of the full council at 4 because it's an ordinance. However, if you did not want to take the full 1% this year and wanted to bank it, it's a very similar process. You would pass the IPD resolution for the 0.251%. Takes 4 votes to do that. And then you would pass a substantial need resolution, but we're calling it the banking substantial need resolution, so it's a different resolution and it's in your packet. There's a little bit different language. And then it grabs the 0.749% for future use and its future capacity. And again, that is still a substantial need resolution and requires the vote of the majority of full council plus 1, which is 5 votes. Another option, of course, is to implement just the IPD. And to do that, there's just one ordinance that has to be passed, the routine ordinance, and that's in your packet. It's the same one you would pass in the other 2 as well, and it requires 4 of you to do that since all of you are here this evening. Now, we didn't put here because the council hasn't had this discussion. There hasn't been any discussion, but you know, you can pick any number you want below 1%. 1% to infinity below 1%, of course, but we don't have any resolutions to do anything but
We can do a
these.
negative number then?
I mean, I just want
Done
to be
one.
clear. The council can do whatever, the council could eliminate property taxes. That's, I mean,
That's a
obviously.
great idea.
Yeah, obviously, we'd have to close up, but other than that. And then, so if you were to do one of the two latter bullets there on the resolutions, such that we would only be taking the 0.251% this year, Jen does have an ordinance kind of in the wings, ready to go. So you know the difference is, it doesn't change the amount that we would spend in the general fund as we discussed last time. But what it would do, it would increase the amount that we would transfer from 125 to the general fund to cover the expenses. And it's totally appropriate for you to do that. That would be our
And
recommendation.
which option would that be?
That would be for the second and third bullets.
Anything less than 1%.
Anything less than 1%. So the budget's counting on the 1%, which is roughly, I know these are rough numbers, it's roughly $40,000. If you do the banking or just the IPD, then 30,000 comes off, 3/4 of the 40, and there's only $10,000 of additional property tax revenue in 16 compared to what we received in 15. So we would take $30,000 from Fund 125 and transfer it to the general fund. So it doesn't change the expenditures in the general fund, but it does change the expenditures in Fund 125, and so she has an ordinance that shows it like that. Now, this is all true for the EMS levies as well, the same procedures here, except the dollar amount's significantly lower because the EMS levy is less than $1 million total. It's 600 and something thousand dollars, I believe, and so the 0.25% is, I don't even think it's $2,000, and the 0.75% is like 5,000. I'm going to get the numbers wrong, but they're much smaller than the other ones. And again, you don't have to do the same thing for both. You could take the full 1% for the EMS based on the findings in the substantial need resolution for that, and bank the general, or only, you know, you can do whatever you would like with that. But here's a roadmap for you. And our assumption has been, based on your conversations, that you will pass, that you're intending to pass, and I think most of the comments that I've heard would indicate that there's an intent to pass by the council, the IPD resolution at the very least, for both the general and the EMS. So when you get to that point on the agenda, that would be fairly straightforward to do that. And then I think there may be some deliberation on the council is whether or not to bank the 1%, or to take the full 1%, or to not even bank it. And I don't know that there's, consensus yet on the council about what to do with that. And I'm assuming that'll be the deliberation once those motions are on the table this evening. So any questions on this?
Ganesha?
I notice there's no option for no tax increase.
I just said that verbally. We haven't had, no one on the council has brought that up, so we didn't include that as a reference.
We wouldn't need a resolution at all, then,
You do, you pass a resolution, I was just reading that today, you pass a resolution that, because you have to tell the assessor,
So just to keep it flat, we'd need a resolution.
you just put the same, so basically you would tell the assessor, and of course, this is not the number, right? In 2015, we collected $10 of property taxes, and in 2016, we'd like to take $10 again. And that's a 0% increase.
So you have no idea what that number would be? We saw the comparison, even if we did the was it the 1%, we would still pay less this year than the year before? I mean, in 2016. We don't have any idea what it would be if we did no tax increase.
If we did no tax increase, I could probably pull up the presentation from last meeting. I think it was at the last meeting where Jen presented those, or maybe it was 2 meetings ago.
It's the same.
And she showed what would happen. I can't read.
It's kind of little.
Yeah. I'm trying to see where. Here we go.
Yeah.
So, remembering that the council doesn't set a tax rate. The council sets the total amount of money that comes in. The council sets a levy amount. And then the assessor determines a tax rate based on our assessed valuation. And based on the information we have from the assessor, if you take the full 1%, our levy will be just shy of $4.1 million. That's the top row there. Know that roughly $40,000 of that is because of the 1%. So if you don't do it, our tax levy would be $4,022,000 instead of $4,062,000. And that tax rate is 267 or 264 basically. So it would be a little bit less than that. Maybe into the 5th significant digit because it's a really, small amount. Mm-hmm. If you only do the IPD, you can see it goes down $30,000 in the total levy. Then the assessor calculates our tax rate, and it's basically, it goes down to almost, but not quite, 2 cents per AV. So for a home that is appraised at assessed, I shouldn't say appraised, there's a difference. If the assessor says it's $280,000, that's less than a $6 difference annually in your property taxes. So about 50 cents a month is what the difference is. And those numbers are less for a $280,000 house in 16 than they were in 15. But a $280,000 house in 15 is not a $280,000 house in 16. It'll be so it really depends on what your individual assessed value is and this new rate, whether or not one line out of all the lines on your tax bill that's just for us will be higher or lower. Even with the 1%, it could be lower. You could be paying less to the city, even with the 1% increase. But we will take $40,000 more in total because there's more individuals paying that tax, or others whose assessed value went up higher than yours. I hope that answered your question.
Yes.
Volume is a wonderful thing. Paul?
I'm done, thanks.
And the EMS levy that we talked about, is that affected with the fact that Camas doesn't need as much as they originally asked for? It affected?
No, I wouldn't say that that affects the EMS levy.
Because we're still collecting our maximum amount on
Yeah,
that.
the voters approved. So here's where that nuance is interesting. The way that happens is when it starts, it's a 50-cent levy. So for the first year of the 6 years, because it's a 6-year levy, you actually do set a rate. You set a 50-cent rate. because it's a special levy. And the levy amount is then calculated off of that rate. But then in year 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, it's treated just like this. You got whatever your amount was and you're limited to the 1%, or the IPD, in this case 0.25%. So Camas gave us information that the number in their preliminary 2016, or their already approved 2016 budget wasn't enough, and that halfway through their biennial budget, they needed $180,000 more. And they gave us that information kind of late, and we shared that with you and said that we would be tapping into Fund 125 to that same amount. We met with them again. They have the same concerns we do, cost control and containment, and they were able to work through some different things and just refine and update their data such that that number went down. That's what we reported last week. Now it's in the $50-ish thousand range. But what that means is we won't have to take 180 from Fund 125. We can take just 50 from Fund 125. But I don't think that should impact the decision to keep tracking with the EMS levy. The expenses 2016 over 2015 in that program are higher than 1%. The growth is higher than 1% pursuant to our contract for a number of reasons that we've talked about here at a prior workshop. Call volume being one of them.
So to follow up on that, if we just did the 0.251% for the EMS levy, we would just have to take more out of Fund 125.
We take a little bit more out of Fund 125. That's correct. Right.
Right.
And of course, you know that the administration's recommendation on both the general and the EMS levy is the full 1%, and the mayor has proposed and doesn't, not lightly, and it's made suggested findings of substantial need for you in those resolutions. The full 1% in the budget includes that. If that's not the direction that 5 counselors want to go, because it would take 5 of you to do that, even if 4 of you wanted to do that, you could not do it. If that's not the direction you want to go, then we would ask that you bank the capacity. And I think some of the logic I've heard around not doing 1% fully is trying to stay true to the IPD. And note that is a very straightforward notion, right? The IPD is this, let's stay true to that. The IPD next year might be 2. And then
We could use the bank capacity.
and if you stay true to that logic, you would take 1.749 next year. It'd be more than 1% because you would take the 1% and then you take the 0.749, and in that line of thinking, as long as that was less than the IPD, it would be a comfortable position to be in. Let's say the IPD next year is only 1.5. You don't have to take everything you banked. You can capture, I don't think.
Could only capture that.
Yeah, you could capture 0.5 of it and still have 0.249, and then if the next year it was 1.5, you could grab it again. So you have lots and lots of options in terms of the banking of the future capacity. I don't think you have to make one decision at one point in the future. That's my understanding. So that would be what we would ask you to do. And again, that takes 5 of you to do that. If you don't grab the full 1% on either of them,
For the banking.
we would ask you to please look at the banking.
How much do we have in Fund 125?
We have almost 700,000, I believe.
Okay.
And that's, there is no more revenue going to that fund. That's all revenue that was left from the first cycle of a levy lid lift, the 10-cent levy lid lift for fire and EMS services that was collected between 2006 and 2012. It can only be used for fire and emergency services, and it's been the administration and the council's shared desire and direction to look at that as a rainy day, if you would, kind of pot for our fire and EMS services, or potentially capital expenses if apparatus need, something like that. So this might be considered that in a banking context for sure.
Dave?
When do those funds sunset?
They don't.
They do not.
Every once in a while you get a break.
Well, following up on that, I'm actually trying to apply, what was Initiative 747 as reinstated by the legislature. I'm actually trying to apply the intent of that law. And the intent was to limit property tax increases to 1% or the IPD, whichever is lower. And allowing for banking, because that's actually part of the law as well.
Right.
I can't make substantial findings, a substantial need finding for actually either one this year, but I can for the future to preserve our base. So I'm okay with banking both, but I don't think I can support full 1% for either resolution this year.
Can I ask your rationale on the EMS levy?
We have the fund, we have the money in the reserve fund from a prior levy, Fund 125.
Yeah. I guess I'm thinking of that as comforting to have there, as opposed to spending it down and then suddenly being faced with, you need $180,000.
Actually, the council could choose to do something different, but the administration's proposal to you in a banking context for either of the levies is that the difference would actually come from Fund 125. So if you bank the 1%, our proposal in the budget ordinance is that an additional $30,000 be transferred from Fund 125 to the general fund to balance the mayor's proposed budget. Similarly, a much smaller amount would be proposed to be transferred to cover the EMS difference. The implication, the consequence of that is there's, call it $35,000 less in Fund 125 after 2016 than there currently is. Keeping in mind that these are all estimates, right? Your budget is an estimate, although we're bound by the expenditure limits. The revenues are estimates, and we may, in 2016, do better than we think. You know, we are projecting revenues for 2016. Jennifer has increased some of the line items because of recent economic activity, and that's very good. But it's still cautious and conservative, which is the administrative and the council approach in this community. We're conservative, so we may not even need Fund 125 in 2016. But if we do, it'll just be $35,000 less than we had, and you know that's the implication.
5% less, roughly.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay, Joe?
Okay, so I'm just trying to do some rationale here. Fund 125 is a one-time pot.
Right.
It's not like our reserve where we're mandated to have 16% or anything like that. So in other words, it's the taxpayers' money, it's sitting in the bank. And I have always seen us as a council want to use something that's in the bank rather than just let it sit there. I think we should spend that $70,000.
$700,000?
700, that's 700K. Yeah, that's what I have written. What, 70,000? Big difference. I just think the rationale is, why wouldn't we spend it down?
I'm agreeing with you, but I think Dave wants to speak.
Go ahead, you need to answer that specific
Well,
question. I had one for you.
here's the other thing that's my thinking is, how do we get Fund 125? It's leftovers from a prior levy.
Correct.
Which was passed by the voters.
Right.
For emergency services and fire services.
Correct.
Good. Why raise it again?
Well, I'm starting to wonder whether we should take the money out of that to just cover our general fund shortfall because we don't impose the full 1%. Because that's not what we told the voters, even though, you know, the law allows us to spend it this way. We got it from the voters for other things.
Well, we would be spending it on that.
Yeah, you'd only be,
EMS.
it's highly restricted.
That's right.
Okay.
And
Right.
it goes clear back to a baseline of 2006, 2007.
Right.
Of what our expenses were for that department and for those
Okay.
services.
Remember
What it
this-
could be used for. Basically, what happened when the first and it gets really complicated. When the first levy lid lift was done, the first dime was done. The first year it was instituted, it generated more than a dime,
Okay,
just because.
okay,
Where economics were, assessed valuations were, expenses were, on and on and on. It created more than 10 cents per thousand in revenue. It did the year after that as well, but to a smaller amount. So the first year it generated like 15 cents instead of a dime. The second year was like 12. And then I think we were done. So it was just a bump for 2 years because of where the
Okay.
market was and where assessed valuations were.
okay,
Ever since then, it stopped.
okay.
One of the ways that we got the reserves built back up, your general fund reserves, and stabilize the budget, was in 2010, having Paul Lewis come in and completely re-examine all of the financials of the city, going back to before 2006. And one of the things that we had found is, golly, you've paid an ungodly amount of expenses for fire and EMS out of your general fund that you didn't need to. They qualify under 125.
Okay.
And so what we did is went back and took those and moved them and made some of those changes. So we used up some of it during that.
When did that happen?
That was in 10. And we made those.
10 into 11, I think that's
Yeah,
when we
effective
actually
changes into
created
11.
Fund 125. And there was one other little quick thing on how the Fund 125 balance got accrued. It doesn't exist anymore. It was statutorily corrected. However, at the time of the first levy lid lift, there was the notion of supplanting. And so you could not use any proceeds from the lid lift to pay for fire expenses that were more than the base year. So if you spent $10 on fire in 2006, you couldn't use levy lift proceeds to support anything more than $10 every year for the life of the lift. And obviously, our fire and EMS expenses increased every year. 7 was $10.20 or something, and not $10. So you couldn't transfer it all over. There was an initial correction, and it wasn't even in a Fund 125, it was just sitting there in our general fund reserves. Paul helped us
It actually
separate
kind of
out.
had one. Becky Hassert, the former 2 finance directors ago, actually had an account that it was in, and then it got swept.
And we created a fund, and
Who knows why?
Yeah.
And it was just kind of ironic that when we went back and traced that thing back, everything else, well, the amount that swept back was pretty close to the same dollar amount, so.
you could actually, one quick thing, and it might help with these questions that are coming up. Just for some context for you, I think I said that supplanting wrong. You could use it for expenses that were in excess of. You couldn't supplant the expenses you already had. Now that
Right,
makes more
right.
sense. I said it backwards. I meant if you spent $10 in year 1 and you spent $10.50 in year 2, you could use the EMS proceeds for that 50 cents. Otherwise, you were supplanting the original. That constraint doesn't exist anymore. Our expenses in 2016 and in 15 and 14 and 13 have been pretty largely in excess of what they were in 2006, as you can imagine. 10 years later, the costs for the level of service we have in this community for fire and EMS are more than 2006. They are so much more than in 2006 that if you really wanted to, you could transfer every penny of Fund 125 into the general fund to support fire and EMS services. And but it's one-time money. It's not an ongoing source of revenue. So you haven't seen us ever over the last several years bring to you, unless we really had to during the recession, Fund 125 as a way to operationally balance the budget. We try to not do that. But we had to kind of live off of that a little bit during the Great Recession. Now we're going to have to do a little bit in 2016 and maybe a little bit more depending on what you do with these resolutions. But if you really wanted to, and we chatted about this during all the workshops that we've had this year, and the consensus was that we wanted to hang on to those funds for a rainy day, I guess. We could identify $600 call it 600 now because we might use some for operations, $600,000 of one-time type expenditures in this community, and make those expenditures and backfill the EMS with the Fund
Or we could put
125.
it all into, move into another reserve fund, just a general reserve fund, couldn't we?
You could stick it
That
over
that
there.
eliminates a level of complexity I'm not sure we need.
Right. We kind of like having it in Fund 125 because it does kind of go with that spirit of the levy lid lift a little bit, even if it's symbolic, but I think it helps to that. But yes, we could put it in a different kind of a fund because your operational expenses in fire are that much more in 16, as you can imagine, than they are in 2006. I didn't mean to add that other layer in there, but it's just to give you a feel for, you have lots of discretion with Fund 125.
But once it's gone, it's gone.
But once it's gone, it's gone. This whittles away at it a little
That's
bit.
when you raise your taxes.
Dave?
I just wanted to address something that Brent said, and it'll take me 15 seconds. I see Michelle's interested there. Was the increasing economy, improving economy, part of your rationale for not supporting the 1%?
I'm just trying to apply the intent of the law, and I don't think that our financial situation is such that we can make a finding of substantial need. And part of that is the increasing economy, yes.
Okay, and that's what I was interested in, because you'd mentioned that once before. Thank you.
Michelle?
Yeah, I was just wondering, the 376,283 from the budgeted last year in Fund 125 to the 700 now, where's that money coming from then?
So we're in the 2015 budget.
Yeah.
Jen is projecting that we won't need to use any of it. That the news is better. And that's happened actually the last couple of years. So again, everything is based on revenue estimates and the expenditure estimates. And she only transfers from Fund 125 if she needs to at the end of the year when she closes everything out. Her projection for 2015 is that we won't need to use it.
Oh, so it's basically doubling, almost.
Yeah, whatever, I don't have the 2015 document in front of me. What does it say for ending fund balance?
376,283, but this might not be the updated one.
And then does it show an expenditure?
No.
Should be an expenditure.
Oh,
Am I 2015 budget or 2016?
15.
Are you looking at the 15 or the 16?
She's got the 16.
Oh, you're looking at the
You're looking
16.
at the
Yeah.
16.
I would need the 15.
Yep.
Okay.
Let's take a look at that. What page are we on?
I can find it on the internet.
It's going so
so
slow.
it's basically money that you had thought was gonna be gone, and now it's. Okay.
Yeah. And she hasn't, I'm not sure if her 2016 proposed Fund 125 budget captures the "we won't need it," and it might be assuming that we do, because she hasn't closed the year out yet. We're still in November. She'll do that in the first quarter next year. But her estimates are, we're not going to need to do that.
Here. It shows projected revenue of $320, which is probably interest.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, late payments and interest from the levy.
And then a proposed budget of $51,130. What's that for?
That's the
That's-
shortfall to Camas.
That's,
Okay,
yep,
so we're already putting some money
yes,
there, okay.
yes.
Using some of it.
using,
We're using some of Fund 125
yeah.
to cover it. Now, we had thought, the last time two times ago, we thought it was 180. And then the last time we met, we were able to tell you that we think it'll be about 51, so it's 51.
Okay.
Yep. It would be 81 if you don't do the 1% on the general, and it'll be about 86.
Yeah, she had estimated a number that's close to what Camas is back to now, and then the big jump was what their estimated was. That was so much over the top of hers.
Yeah, it was a lot
Back
more.
again. So, Connie Jo, you had made the comment that once the fund is gone, that's when you raise taxes.
Well, I'm trying to understand
Yeah,
that.
the problem with that is if you use it all now or you use it all between now and next year or the next 3 years, and 2 years from now, your IPD and oh golly, inflation is up to 2, 3, 4%, you can't get it all back from taxes.
Unless you bank it.
Yeah, if you have the ability to bank that much to get there. Because again, you can only go up by that number or 1%, whichever is greater, and what you've got banked.
So if you bank it, you don't have to use it the following years.
You don't have to use it at all, you just have to keep an eye to, at some point, if things go out of whack again, you losing the ability to bank it.
Does it expire? Is it a 10-year?
Never
I
expires.
remember something.
That we know of, it doesn't expire. You're literally kind of putting it into a very odd savings account. That lets you go back to the voters. Actually, not to the voters, back to the ratepayers, taxpayers.
Statute talks about, I'd have to pull up the RCW, but the highest lawful levy that you can levy in any one year is your highest lawful levy of one of the prior 3 years, so it accounts for dips, times 1.01, or the IPD if it's less than 1.01, unless you make a finding of substantial need. And if you're in a community of less than 10,000, I think it's 10,000, then you can take the 1% without a finding of substantial need. I think very small communities, they assume that you're in a constant state of that, I guess. But 15,000, you're not.
It's just irrational.
One of the kind of odd problems that all of this brings up is that when you go to Olympia and you say, you swept our Public Works Trust Fund, you took away, you're not giving us any money to enforce marijuana. You're not giving us any money for local transportation projects. Their immediate response is, are you using all of the tools you have? Did you take the 1%? Did you take the $20 tab fee? If you didn't, don't come complaining to me, because I have McClary. I have a new initiative that increases class size that effectively doubles the impact of McClary. So, you know, here's the world's smallest violin. You didn't take advantage of the tools that you had, so why should we feel sorry for you?
Any other comments, questions? It's kind of a long time from Jen's original slide there.
So it's
David?
good stuff.
Question, if I may. Paul, so what does all that mean in terms of the issues facing us tonight on the tax increases?
I think at a minimum, you have to bank them. Otherwise, you're saying to the legislature, we don't need the money.
Don't need it.
Got it. Thank you.
And I think that's kind of the lowest level argument. I would argue that as an economist, the economy goes up, the economy goes down. The economy right now is on the way up. The time to raise taxes is on the way up. That's when you should be building reserves, so that when the economy tanks, you can spend those reserves and maintain a much more level spending policy than up and down with the economy. Because the problem, of course, is when the economy tanks, now you're going to fire people and add to the unemployment. And then when the economy comes back up again, you're going to be in an extremely competitive employment market trying to hire people. So it really makes sense, back to the J.P. Morgan famous statement about buy low, sell high, is you really need to be counter-cyclical. So as prices go up, as prices go up, you kind of pull in, but you raise revenue, and you put that revenue into capital savings. Then when prices go down and it's tough out there, then you've got the capital savings to spend. And not only that, you're going to get a deal. So I personally think that as we look forward, we've got a pretty good economy looking at us for the next year or two. Beyond that, it's anybody's guess. My own guess, and it's only a guess, is that 3.5 years from now, we're going to be in the beginnings of a recession. Thank you.
Mayor, I just had one other thing. This is from a couple of sessions ago. Jen had this presentation. I think it's really great historical context, just for what it's worth. But if you look at this year's levy, and the jump from 14 to 15, recall, includes some levy lid lift jump. The levy in our current levy is $4,022,000. The highest levy in the community was in 2010 at $4,066,000. So the levy that we're proposing, the total amount of general property tax revenue that's in the mayor's proposed budget in 2016 is actually less than the property tax revenue that we received in 2010 by a little bit, because it's about $40,000 higher than the 2015. He's asking for a levy of $4,062,000, and in 2010 it was $4,066,000. So it's just an interesting historical comparison. We're trying to provide services for a community that's a little bit bigger than it was in 2010. It's not as dramatically bigger over those 5 years as it was in the preceding 5 years to 2010, but nonetheless increasing call volumes in fire, increasing call volumes in police, increasing expectations around street maintenance, more older streets, they're 5 years older than they were. So the services that we're providing we're providing more services than we were in 2010, yet the levy we're asking for in 2016 is basically the same. I don't want to say less because it's within a couple $1,000s, but less than it was in 2010. There's a very interesting context to provide, just some background for where it's at. Weigh that against notions of the IPD, and unfortunately the Great Recession and declining assessed valuation, which led to these lower levies where we were getting truncated. We were losing money and having to make cuts and cut back on services. Is counterintuitive to the normal context for an IPD. I think the general assumption is that there's price pressure and not deflation, but we suffered some deflation significantly in property values, and that's the trouble when you're dependent upon property values for your major source of revenue. It's very challenging. So that's your balancing act. There's where we were at. We're almost catching up. The proposal is to kind of catch up to 2010, but we're asking you to do that in the face of a statute that implemented I-747 that talks about an IPD.
And mischaracterized the IPD.
Well, and that's one of the reasons that administratively we're still recommending that you take the 1% and take it on both of them. Regardless, over the last few years and probably well beyond that, councils have knowingly, and in the last 2, 3, 4 years as well, we've knowingly approved a budget that has expenses that are rising between 2 and 3.5% every year. We know it's going to go up 2 to 3%, 2 to 3.5%, somewhere in there. On the income side, the maximum amount we can raise anything is 1%. So we're going, to some degree, some people would look at that and go, you're going in the hole. You can't sustain that. That's that deficit that we've got, the structural deficit. And by taking the 1%, we don't solve that structural deficit. It's still there. By taking less than 1%, we're still less. You're creating more of a deficit in there, at least for that first year or so. To me, the 1%, when it was instituted in I-747, made absolutely no sense. It was just a number. Gee, there's the number. Let's throw a dart. Is it 1? Is it 4? Is it 3? We want it to be less than 6 that people were taking at the time, 5, 6 on an annual basis. That's really when to me, that's really when you're raising taxes. When you're taking a statutory allowed 1%, technically, yep, you're raising taxes. But when you're doing it at the same time that you know that you're still losing another 1 to 2.5%, so you've got a lot of years that our costs have certainly overtaken that 1%, and it will continue to do that. Even the IPD. I mean, suggest any other number to go out there and go after. Who cared at that point? They were looking at it in the face of significant increases in many of the communities. And obviously, we don't have that anymore. One, we haven't. Two, you'd have a tough time still operating your city and having people live in it, should you have still been doing that, so.
That's why we are trying to promote everything we can to enhance sales tax revenue in this community, because that can grow. It's cyclic, so there's risk associated with that as well. But it's broken model, local government financing. If it's heavily property tax dependent and you can only get 1% per year, if you were a special purpose district that only had property tax revenue, that's the only thing that it had, and it's limited to 1%, you can imagine that over time, essentially, as you get out a long time into the future, it goes away. Because it's just those lines diverge. You cannot do it. You would be reducing services, even to keep up with 1%. That would be reducing services every year until there are no more services. So the funding model for local government in this state forces us to look at never-ending growth. Keep building new stuff because it's 1% plus new construction. But then that can't go on forever. You can't keep doing that. So sometimes I call that, it's like candy. But good growth can be more nourishing than that. Industrial growth.
Strategic
and retail. Then you want retail sales tax. The other main leg of our stool is the utility tax. It's a huge portion of our general funding. And the other one the legislature's given you is the B&O. And that's kind of an untenable topic in this part of the state for a number, we don't have to get into all of that. So that's where we're at, and that's why you see your strategic plan, a lot of things that we're doing is about trying to increase the sales tax base, working our downtown and that vibrancy, the waterfront, everything else. So hopefully that slide that got us into this, and it's part of your it's kind of part of your deliberations, almost if you think about it, it's the deliberations from up front for your 7 o'clock meeting. But hopefully that slide, and we'll put it back up when we get to that on the agenda, it provides the decision tree for you. That was the primary intent of it, is as a reference for you, so that making motions and knowing what to do.
I appreciate the discussion.
Anything else on?
I want to ask about something, but it's not on this. I
Fire away.
want to jump subjects, is that okay?
Mhm.
The city has taken on itself to do a Christmas tree for the schools foundation, the Washougal Schools Foundation, and we're decorating one, the city of Washougal is, a Star Wars theme, and these trees will be auctioned off, and the money goes into the foundation, which is distributed to the school. We will be doing a tree at Hathaway. I was shopping the other day to get some things, and the parameters of it, lights have to be new and LED. I would like to bring to the council if we could have some funding up, not more than $250, to help buy the lights for the trees. The staff, there's a box back there, the staff is putting in ornaments and toys and different things that will be on the tree, but the lights seem to be an expensive part of this. So, I don't know, I was talking to David, I've talked to Jen about that, I don't know how this request comes or how we approach this, but,
Well, that's a very, relatively speaking, small amount, and it's the type of expenditure, when things come up like that, you know, the mayor has the ability within the confines of the adopted budget to undertake things like that. It's not something that we specifically budgeted for, so I thought it would be healthy for the council to talk about it a little bit, but I don't think it's an action item, it's more of a conversation.
What do these trees usually sell for?
I don't know.
I'm just wondering, we're investing,
I don't know.
not,
They-
I'm not
they-
complaining, just
Okay,
curious.
no, they want to raise $15,000. That's their goal by auctioning off the trees. So they've been doing it since 2010, which I wasn't aware of, but it didn't say how much they have sold for. But their goal is $15,000. The tree is provided, and then we decorate it.
Tree and the standard provided.
So the trees were donated by Washougal River Christmas trees. So,
How many trees are there?
I don't know.
Does it say?
I
They're always trying to add to them. They've got a lot of other things that they've got a lot of
They do
the baskets and that
baskets
kind of stuff that they do in silent auctions that adds to it as well.
So, anyway,
This one will be unique because, certainly if you're doing a Star Wars theme, the only thing you can put on it are lightsabers.
say, well, there's lights and there's Yodas with candy I mean, there's a lot of stuff, but when we started buying, it's expensive to decorate a tree.
Can be.
And
Yeah.
you can't use used lights. That was the main thing. The lights have to be new and LED. That was,
Starts at 9 in the
the
morning. They let you in at 9.
Kicker.
yeah, I think that's the expensive. It's a 6-foot
Dollar amounts
tree.
vary. I mean, they're $50 to $500 to you get grandpa that's going out and going against another grandpa whose kids' classes have put the tree together, and how high can they go because they're doing it for the foundation anyway.
Yeah.
It really depends on how many goodies there are under it.
Well, I've never done this before, so I don't know. But I thought if we did it again, we would pick a theme early in the year, and we would have a long timeline to figure this out, so we weren't into this kind of an expense that we're hitting up for decorating next week, or 2 weeks.
I don't know how the Vancouver Rotary does the one that's downtown. I'm familiar with the Providence Festival of the Trees in downtown Portland, and that one, to give you an idea where these things go, they give their tree decorators, it may be more now, a few years ago it was $2,500 seed money for the decorations. But some of those trees are going for $30,000, $40,000, $50,000.
I don't think
There you
ours will
go.
do that.
No.
No.
One, they're not that big. But you get the Wells Fargos of the world behind them, all those different type of companies that are going in and doing them. I mean, they're decorating a 15, 20-foot tree that's gonna go into a lobby, into a building in downtown, and they raise big, enormous amounts of money.
I was in the downtown Rotary, I wasn't on the Festival of Trees committee, so I don't want to get it wrong, but I thought sponsorships provided the seed money and the designers worked with the sponsors. I could be mistaken, the organization may have had a budget to seed it, and then they took that out. It was the Rotary Foundation that did it. It wasn't the
Right.
Rotary Club, it was the Rotary Foundation, and that was the major fundraiser for college scholarships. $300,000 program for Vancouver Rotary Foundation, which was a great thing. So I guess it's not an action item. Does anyone on council have concerns about the city making an investment in the tree?
Participating in the decorations.
That's a go.
No, I've got no problem with it. The Schools Foundation, the money goes to some scholarships.
I need to.
And You can tell, you can
Because
tell.
it doesn't go to the school's foundation. It's sponsored by the Lions Club. It goes to the schools themselves.
Oh,
It doesn't
okay.
go, it does not go through the foundation.
Oh,
As a
okay,
matter of
thank
fact,
you.
the foundation is gonna be decorating a tree this year
Thank
with
you.
our own funds. But we don't take any of the funds. It doesn't pass through the
Thank you.
foundation.
Okay, here it says Hathaway Elementary, they spent their money on RAZ Kids. This is an online reading program that students can use at school or at home. And it says a one-year subscription is $99 per teacher. So that's what Hathaway spends their money on. So I guess after the trees are auctioned, they pool the money and then each school gets
Right.
part of it.
They give it directly to the
Yeah, of what they do with it.
The tree decoration is on the 2nd at 9 AM at Hathaway.
Is that it?
Oh, I don't know, I'm
I don't know that, I don't
Okay.
know the time.
Yeah, I have the forms here, if I could just pull that up for you. Let's
We
see.
got our student representative wants to be recognized.
So in middle school, I saw some of this, and all the middle schoolers really enjoyed it. They like to, they had the opportunity to bring in some decorations, and I thought, and after it was sold, the school was all pretty generally happy. So, from my perspective as a student, it is a good thing.
Thank you.
So are the toys and decorations new only? Because these are
Yep.
collectibles,
Yes.
Star Wars.
Yep.
Yes, yes. But I don't think they have to be, it's just that the lights have to be new.
Right, the
Yeah, the
lights,
lights
but I'm
have to
talking
be-
about the other
Yeah,
decorations.
they don't say that.
Generally, I think they have been.
But if someone has a
Yes.
1978 Chewbacca toy and put that on the tree,
Yeah,
they could get a lot on
Designate what it is.
eBay for that.
That might be acceptable.
Yeah.
Boy, too bad we didn't have more time for that.
yeah, I know.
Yeah, they literally, one of the neat things is the trees, for the folks running at the trees afterwards, if they're decorated appropriately, literally, they just saran wrap the entire thing.
Yep.
When it gets picked up, you don't take everything all back off or anything else, you
No,
literally just
they just-
saran wrap
that's
it up
exactly what
and
they
shrink
do.
wrap it. Goes to wherever it's going, and they get to unshrink wrap it, and there's your tree. But they try and keep things obviously not breaking and all intact, so.
Well, and you can see what's been purchased back there in the box. I mean, there's some nice things there that the staff is bringing in.
To bring closure to this, I'm willing to leave it to the mayor's discretion.
Okay, any other items from council? Any items from members of the public? Molly?
Thank you.
Molly Costin, 2176 37th Street here in Washougal. I realize you have some pretty dense topics on the agenda for tonight. You've discussed them for quite a while, which is exactly as it should be, but I'd like to speed back to one small issue that was discussed about an hour ago, and that is the projected speed bumps on W Street. So I live just off of W Street, as do hundreds of my friends and neighbors. It's the major street to access 32nd and thus, Safeway, Highway 14, everything else. And I just would like the city to make sure that we look at alternative ways of calming traffic other than speed bumps. That means in a 5-block area, I would have to go over 2 speed bumps between 37th Street and 32nd Street. And I would say I use that street almost every day for walking, biking, and of course now driving. And I'm pretty much of a law-abiding citizen, but I would say anecdotally, I would say that the majority of people that I see using excessive speed, and there are some, absolutely, are kids rushing to and from school at the high school. So that's their major pathway. They come down Stiles or up W Street, and then they hit 39th and they zoom down. So I would just hate to see it be, in a sense, punitive against the majority of drivers who do drive the speed limit, and it's a heavily used street, and try to find an alternative way to keep those kids going a little bit slower. So that's all I got. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Molly. Items from anyone else? Okay, I've got no items.
I got, just follow up on Molly's question, are there any alternative ways?
I think there's a menu of calming, there's preferred methods.
Yeah, it depends on the infrastructure in place or lack thereof. As Molly knows, in that specific area from 32nd to 44th, we have some infill, some construction where we've got curb and gutter and we have sidewalk, and then we've got sections where it's just open curb or just swale. So depending on the type of infrastructure you have in place, you do have different options as far as bulb outs. We have bulb outs in the downtown. We also have those along 32nd Street as far as traffic calming devices. We also have the bulb outs on I Street from 28th to 32nd, which was actually a CDBG project. So there is a menu of options. We could take a look at that to see if there's other options beyond the proposed tables that we discussed earlier this evening.
Please do.
And even for Molly and some of her neighbors that may be taking that second one to the east side and putting it on the other side of 37th versus where it is on the west side, then you only have one to deal with.
Yeah, and
But-
I mean, frankly, I would even question, is there data to show, I mean, I understand what they are, because they're big, wide tables, as you said. And so for the, is there statistical data that shows, and I'm sure there is somewhere, that it actually does reduce the speed? And does it reduce the speed of the small percentage of people who use excessive speed on that street?
Although in this case, it looks like it's a large percentage.
All you have to do is hit it once.
Yeah.
And then you say, oh, I won't forget that.
I don't know, as a teenager, I sort of loved the hitting those things really fast.
This is your mom and dad.
You didn't have the low cars that they've got now. Now it just rips it out. Have that left. So Trevor, now we'll have some bumps, we'll have some pillows, and we'll have some tables.
Yeah,
I have a question.
speed mitigation.
You said that a lot of people have come to you on this particular issue from the neighborhood, or?
Yeah, we've had several inquiries and complaints
Does
on
this
this.
warrant some sort of outreach to the residents to ask if this is a preferred method of slowdown for them, or, I don't know.
Yeah, we could launch an outreach to get feedback from stakeholders and property owners in that specific area. The decision-making process is driven off the data as
I
far as the tube counts.
I don't know how you decide upon that, because there seem to be like pro-speed bump people from some of the people that I've talked to, and anti-speed bump people, and they feel pretty strongly either way, so I don't know how you decide.
Yeah.
But,
In these cases, I'd just soon let our traffic engineer
yeah.
decide. Any other items from council, David?
I agree with Molly.
Wow, thank you, Dave.
Any other items? Okay, we're adjourned from here. We'll be back at 7 o'clock for council meeting.